Welcome to the Woodturning Workshop. Today we'll be making something you can use in the kitchen or give as a gift. A cookie cutter. It's going to be a lot of fun. Stay tuned. Everybody loves cookies. I know I do. So when you start making cookie cutters, you're going to be a very popular person. You're going to have to make a bunch of these. Although it looks simple to make, there are a few important things to keep in mind. We're going to be doing some hollowing and spindle turning today. On the hollowing, it's very critical that we make these walls very thin and very straight. Also, we're going to taper the tip. You might notice there's a couple holes, and those are drilled so we don't create a vacuum when the cookie dough is in there. Now this area we have to leave thicker because it has to withstand the pressure pushing down. And by the way, pushing down, we're going to need a good handle to hang on to. So let's get started. We're going to take our blank. I've already marked the centers and driven in a dry spur into it. Going to mount it, bring up the tailstock, get it on that little hole there, and lock it in. Now I'd love to tell you what today's wood is, but a friend gave it to me and he has no idea where he got it, so we're going to be calling it mystery wood today. Unlock the spindle. We're going to make sure that we don't hit the tool rest as we rotate. Get our safety glasses. Make sure our lathe is at a slow speed. Start it up. And we're going to round out with our roughing gouge. As always, when roughing out, make sure of a few things. That you work from the center outward, and that you move your entire body to make the cut. There, we're rounded out now. The very next thing I want to do is to work on this end. We're going to be putting a tenon on it, and I have to make a cut right now to make sure the end is flush. I'm going to use my parting tool for that. There, that's good and flat. Now I'm going to make the tenon about 1/4 inch long. Since my chuck jaws have a bevel, I need to shape the tenon to fit the inside of the jaws. Okay, we've got the chuck mounted, and I've removed the tailstock since we won't need that anymore. Going to mount the wood inside, make sure it's nice and flush. And since when you remount the wood, it goes a little bit out around, I'm going to take my roughing gouge, just take one pass here and clean it up. Now, the next step, we're going to take our parting tool and clean up the end just like we did the other one. Now we're ready to hollow. So grab your bowl gouge and work your way towards the center. We're going to make a dimple about 1 inch deep. Now we're going to start cutting from the inside out. That'll be a better cut and leave us with a cleaner finish. When you start this cut, make sure that you close the tool face, then open it up as the cut starts. Keep working your way down, and just make sure that you leave the walls a little bit thicker than you need them. There, that's pretty good thickness. Now I'm going to use a scraper and clean up the inside. Make sure you have your tool rest high enough that when you use the scraper, it's aiming a little bit downward. And start with the sides, and just work your way in slowly and make that nice and straight. Take really light cuts. You're not in a hurry to remove wood. Now when you're ready for the bottom, just move towards the center and clean it up. Now before we go any further, I need to drill the holes that help you release the cookie dough out of the cutter. I'm going to use my drill, and I've marked it with tape because I don't want to go too deep, because if I go too deep I could drill into where the handle is. If you noticed, I used a punch and made a dimple in the wood, that way the drill bit won't skate. Now it's time to sand the inside. As always, slow the lathe down when you sand. Heat is our enemy. If you build up too much heat, you could crack the wood, especially on walls as thin as this. Now's the time we're going to do one more important step. We're going to use our sandpaper to create the bevel on the edge. Now we need to remove the excess wood so we can start working on the handle. But the first thing we have to figure out is how deep the bottom is. That way we won't cut through it. We're going to use a simple depth gauge. There we go. Now we know the bottom is right here, and I want to leave at least 1/4 of an inch for safety. So make a mark there, and turn our lathe on, and make that mark a little bit bolder so we can see it while we're turning. Now, we're going to use a big parting tool to get rid of the excess wood, and we're going to roughly make that shape. So turn your speed up on your lathe a little bit, and just take real light cuts. To keep your tool from catching in the wood, work your way in 1/4 inch increments. That way the wood won't bind and grab the sides of the tool. Once you get it down to about the diameter of the handle, then you can start reducing the wood for the stem. Now, we got all the extra wood removed. All we have to do now is make our transitions. We're going to do a nice curve and come down here and clean up any torn grain we might have. We're going to do the same on the handle. Now, where these two things meet the stem, I've put a slight curve in right here. Now, that's kind of a hard cut to do. It's a little bit dangerous, so if you don't want to try it, go ahead and leave these good, clean, sharp edges there. There's no problem with that. Grab your spindle gouge, and we're going to start on the cookie cutter end. We're just going to start making a small bead and work away that sharp edge. Now, once we got the curve the way we want it, we want to continue our cut all the way down to the handle. This will clean up any torn grain that might have been left from the parting tool. Now I'm going to make the transition between the stem and the cookie cutter. I have to lower my tool rest because if I don't, I won't be able to rub the bevel of the tool. I'm going to do scooping motions. See how far the tool's hanging out from the tool rest? That's why this is such a difficult cut. Any little mistake and you'll get a catch. Now we're going to shape the underside of the handle. Same procedure. Make a small bead on the edge and then follow it all the way down to the handle. You can see we already have the transition there, so it only takes 1 or 2 cuts to blend them together. Now, we need to shape the top of the handle. We'll start with the parting tool. Now I'm not going to cut all the way through because we have a little bit more work to do before we take this off the lathe. With my spindle gouge, I'm just going to round over the edge. Now we need to sand. I'm going to start at 150, go to 220, and then end on 320 grit. And remember, play it safe when you're sanding. Always wear breathing protection. Now, before we part this off, we have to consider one important thing. This is going to be washed, and when you wash wood, it raises the grain. In other words, the fibers swell up and it feels kind of fuzzy. It doesn't feel nice and crisp like this does now. The way we're going to prevent that is we're going to raise the grain ourselves and sand it off. That way it won't happen when you wash it. We're going to use mineral oil to accomplish that. We're going to put a liberal coat on here and let it soak in. Once it's soaked in, then we're going to re-sand with 320 grit. Isn't that mystery wood beautiful? Don't forget to apply oil on the inside. Okay, oil soaked in, time to sand. One nice thing about sanding with oil, there is no dust, but you will have to turn your paper frequently because the dust and oil will build up. Now speed the lathe up and apply a bit of beeswax. Then with a folded paper towel, melt the beeswax into the wood. Grab your parting tool and part the cookie cutter off the lathe. Remember, when you're parting, always make a relief cut to the side, that way the tool doesn't get pinched. This small belt sander is a great tool for smoothing and shaping the top of the handle. I've got the handle shaped the way I want it now. I just need to finish sanding to 320 grit to smooth it out and match the rest of the cookie cutter. And the way I'm going to do that is take a Jacob's chuck, mount it in the headstock. I'm going to take a soft sanding pad, mount that in the chuck, tighten it down. And this pad has Velcro on it, so you can take your sanding disc and just attach it like that. And the reason I'm going with a soft sanding pad, look how this conforms to the shape of the handle. That way it'll smooth and follow the contours I already have there and not leave any harsh lines. So we're going to turn the lathe on, make sure we have it at a slow speed, and we're going to start at 150 and we'll wind up working our way through 320. I've got the lathe running at about 500-600 RPM, and you notice how I'm moving the handle around. If I keep it pressed in one spot, on end grain, it's very susceptible to checking. So if we build up too much heat, we'll wind up with split marks in here, and that'll be very unattractive. Now this is the real beauty of the Velcro system. I've changed grits. I'm ready to go again. Same procedure as before. We want to raise the grain, so we're going to take some oil, rub it in, and since it's in grain, it really soaks up the oil. So you're going to have to put a few coats on here to get it in there. Starting to build up now, it's not soaking in anymore. So we'll let that sit for about 5 minutes. To cut down the grain, I'm going to use the same system I used to sand the top of the handle a minute ago. And I've left the same piece of sandpaper on here because that's my final grit. If you notice, there's a lot of buildup of dust on here and I want to clean that off, so we're going to use a gum eraser to do that. Start the lathe up and bring the eraser into contact with the sandpaper. And since this is a soft disc, you're going to have to press a little bit harder. You can see it's removing most of that excess dust. And it's exposing the sandpaper again. So it's like having a brand new piece of sandpaper. Grab the cookie cutter, and let's get rid of those raised fibers now. Now it's time to put the beeswax on. And as you remember, we need friction to melt this in. So either this has to move really fast, or this has to move really fast. Well, I vote for the cookie cutter. And we're going to use a jam fit chuck. And we're going to mount this piece of wood in our chuck and tighten the jaws on it. And this is balsa wood, by the way. I like working with it because it's softer than most woods I turn with, so if anything will get scratched, it'll be the balsa wood and not my finished product. Bring our tool rest up, lock it in place, take our cookie cutter. We don't take much off to get this to fit. We're going to turn the lathe on, and we're going to use our large parting tool to trim that down. I want to angle it a bit, turn it off, see if it starts to fit. Oh, that's almost perfect. I'm going to take this back just a little bit farther. Let's see how close we are. Oh, that's fitting beautifully. This is a little bit different than a jam chuck for other projects. Since the walls of the cookie cutter are so thin, we do want to jam on, but we don't want it to be a super tight fit because it'll split it out. I just need enough pressure holding that I can put the wax on the end. So now we're going to start it back up and we're going to apply the wax. Use the wax to press in. That'll hold it on the jam chuck too. Get a folded paper towel and hold it up. And you can see it gets shiny when the heat builds up and it melts in. You'll just smooth that into the handle so you won't see any transition marks. There you go. We have now made a beautiful cookie cutter, and this mystery wood is amazing. I'd sure like to get some more of it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I had a great time, and now it's time to go make some cookies. So until the next time on the Woodturning Workshop, keep turning.